But at the time, I think, particularly given that there had always been a lot of African migration into southern Italy, and a lot of very long-term, over centuries, over millennia, with the Roman Empire population mixing over time, that for a lot of people, maybe Alessandro wasn't necessarily perceived quite straightforwardly as black. Certainly that isn't a term that gets applied to him in the documents of the period.
All right, that's interesting. Now, I'm trying to imagine a society, a European society where they have never seen Africans before. So they brought in this illegitimate African child. Let's even forget that the father ever had sex with the mother, and that is how they came. Let's say they went to Africa and they bought this child and they brought him. And somebody make him a ruler over white. I think that is highly unlikely. What I'm saying is that at the time that Alessandro was the Duke, like you also pointed out, there were also other people like him. Help me clarify this.
So I think that I think that one of the reasons that Alessandro is able to become Duke is because because it's generally accepted that Alessandro's father is a member of the Medici family. Probably Lorenzo, possibly Pope Clement VII, but generally they accept that. And because this is also a quite sexist society, who your father is really matters. And so what Alessandro can do, having a father in a Medici family, even though he's not a legitimate member of the family, is very, very different to what any other child brought from Africa into Italy could do. It's really, really vital to understanding his story to understand that it's about the fact that he has a father and he has that kind of blood from that side of the family that gives him this, it's not quite aristocratic, but gives him this sort of credibility as a ruler because he is one of this family and they have chosen to accept him into the family. So in almost any other case, you can't quite imagine that working in the same way. Now, we do have examples from the 16th century, from the later 15th century, of Africans whose service in Italian states is very highly valued. So we have, for example, we know there are African soldiers in the Venetian service. And one of them, and we've got a case where one of the African soldiers who's fighting for Venice is killed at war, and his widow gets a very, very generous pension, which suggests to me that, they're not going to be paying that pension if they did not think this guy was doing a very good job. So it is possible to, rise on merit in the military context there. But as I say, this is not, I think in Alessandro's case, it really is the Medici father who sort of determines his prospects, because I think that is, that makes an enormous difference.
All right. I don't know how far the argument can take us in this line, because I like the fact that you made mention of race. So that is why I really am trailing this a little bit, because I find it very intriguing and interesting,
Yeah.
Actually, what I'm trying to put across is that in the 1300, it wasn't the first time that the Florence people were saying Africans. Otherwise, it would not make any sense at all that you bring somebody of African origin to first of all come and, because children are not produced in the laboratory. They are produced because a man and a woman decide to have a relationship and they have a sexual intercourse. That is where it happens, no? It doesn't happen because I went there and collect it because it fell down from a tree, so I bring it home. I bring a rat or a cat, no?
Yeah.
You must have to consider yourself equal to another. Then you go into a relationship. Then because the child the child usually come later. It doesn't just come first, no?
Well, you
All
see,
right. Please.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
I would just say I think we have to be a little bit careful about that story of people being equal in a relationship, because I think, unfortunately, one of the quite realistic possibilities, and I have to say, we don't know the facts of the relationship of Alessandro's father and mother, but unfortunately, we do know in the general situation that there is a lot of sexual exploitation of enslaved women that goes on in these Italian households. And there is the story, we do know that some of the sources, including sources I would consider relatively good quality sources from people who know, say that Alessandro's mother was a servant or possibly a slave in the household of the Medici. Now, that raises also quite problematic issues around the power dynamics of what that relationship might have been. If she's a servant, can she really very freely consent to having sex with one of the members of the family, whether or, however that's put, whether it's by force or whether it's not. It's a really, this is quite a difficult dynamic, but I think it's one we have to kind of face up to and say, she may not have had a lot of choice in the matter. So there is that very quite unpleasant background potentially to the way that Alessandro comes into the world. So that's also something I think to consider. We do know, there are other cases where we have marriages between Africans and Europeans in this period that also happens. So we know there are kind of, free relationships recognized in the eyes of the church, but this particular one is not one that's a relationship of marriage or anywhere or anything like it. It seems to be, from the sources that we have, a relationship with quite a lot of inequality in the background.
All right. You are the historian, so we are listening to you.
Okay.
I don't really know if Alessandro's father was going around raping women. I want to believe that there is a kind of a relationship somewhere that produced the children. Whether it is actually a marriage or no, I don't know.
I think on the other side of that, there is this thing that Alessandro was acknowledged eventually as a member of the Medici family, which means that, which sort of implies that there was possibly enough exclusivity in the relationship to know that he was not, for them to be sort of feel confident he wasn't somebody else's child. There's also a document that perhaps hints, although it's not 100% reliable, at a legacy being left to somebody who I would say is a possible candidate to be Alessandro's mother. But it's these sources are so shaky. It's quite it is quite difficult to work out exactly what's going on there.